Okay, well, hello everybody, whatever time of the day it is where you're watching from. Thanks so much for spending the next 30 minutes with me here. I want to talk about Blazor and I want to talk about Entra ID, and it's a little bit like JFK and the moon. I decided to do this not because it's easy, but because it's hard. I have spoken to so many developers, and if you look at examples when people are doing authentication, it's always using something like Auth0. It's never with Entra. There's a lot of fear out there. So I thought, I'm going to write a talk, and I'm going to learn how to do this, and I'm going to dispel the myths and make it really easy. Sorry. There are a lot of moving parts here. However, once you get into those moving parts, you can kind of see how to put it together, and it's not as scary as it first appears when you open the documentation. So today, we are going to take the Blazor Web App Entra example from the, the dotnet Blazor samples GitHub repo, and we're going to implement what we need to do in order to get the application working with one of my tenants. That is, we're going to log into a Blazor server application. That authentication is going to be used in the client WASM application. And we're going to be calling a downstream API, so not within our Blazor application at all, and seeing how we can secure that using application registrations within Entra ID. And hopefully by the end of this, fingers crossed everybody, we're going to be able to see who I am. Or at least who I could be. Who I am, we'll very quickly do right now before we move on. I am Stacy Cashmore. I am a Tech Explorer DevOps for Omniplan based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. We make financial software. I have been coding since the middle of the 1990s, and this is possibly one of the last talks when I'm going to use that phrase because it makes me feel really old. And I'm lucky enough to be able to call myself an MVP since 2020 in developer technologies. That's enough of me talking. We have 25 minutes left, and I have about 25 minutes of demo to do. So we are going to switch to our desktop, and I'm going to talk you through the solution as it comes down from that GitHub repo. We have in our repo, if I can control my mouse, 3 projects. We have our Blazor Web Entra application. That is our Blazor server application. We have the client application. That is the WASM application that is going to be running inside of the client's browser, which is always fun when it comes to authentication because that's going to be running inside the user's machine. So you need to make sure that you're not leaking anything dangerous there. And then we have our minimum API JWT project. That's just going to be our downstream server. So what we're going to be implementing is the weather forecast. As you see it in every single Blazor demo, you have the counter, you have the weather forecast. And we are going to be calling the weather forecast from the WASM client through the Blazor web, and then passing that down to the minimal API JWT. How do we do this? Well, if we come into this first program, that one is from our Blazor Web App Entra. Ignore all the usings at the top. We're just going to have a look at what we need in order to get our authentication working. Number one, and the one that I think is so cool, is this add authentication state serialization. I love this because one of the bits that could be super complex actually isn't. Remember I said that we need to make sure that we leak nothing to our WASM application because that's on the user's machine, running in their browser, super insecure. You can dive in and just assume anything on there is compromised because, it's on the user's machine. They have access. Well, by using this setup, that application never actually needs to authenticate itself. It doesn't need to know how we authenticate. Rather, we're going to authenticate with the server application. We are going to serialize that authentication state, and we are going to give that to the client with just the information it needs to know to ensure that it can call APIs with the correct rights and to ensure that you can use it when displaying or hiding things on the screen, depending on the authorization that that user has. Then we have our authentication itself. We're going to be connecting using OpenID defaults, and we're going to be adding this Microsoft Identity Web App. This is where we do that connection to the Entra authorization. We need to add a few things here. First of all, we need a callback path so that once we've authorized, we can go back to our web app, get the information that we need, and then move forward. This one's just going to be sign-in-OIDC. Then we need to know the client app of the app registration set up to authenticate the users for our application. Now, we're going to be getting this from a secrets file because always put your important stuff in a secrets file. I'm going to go against that in a minute because I'm going to show you my secrets file because you're going to need to see it. Hopefully it's not going to be too bad because as soon as I finish this demo, I'm deleting the web app. So again, fingers crossed, always fun when you're giving demonstrations. Then we need to know the domain that we are using for our authentication. Now, for this one, this is your on Microsoft, if you've not got a custom domain set up inside of Entra, domain. So mine will be staceytardis.onmicrosoft.com. But again, we're going to add that to the secrets file so that we can set that up when we push this down the pipeline into production. Then we need to know the instance where we're going to log in, and we're using Entra. We're just going to use login.microsoftonline.com. We need to know how we should... We don't need to know. We need to let Entra know how we want to consume that authorization data. So what is it going to send back? We want to get a code back, which is one of the most secure ways that you can do it, especially if you're on your server side. We will get a code back. We will then immediately check that code against the authorization, and it will give us our client principal that we need. Now, I say we here, we're not going to do anything because this is all built in for us. We don't need to worry about that level of complexity, which is, kind of awesome. And finally, we need our tenant ID. So what tenant do we need to authenticate against? There's this last one here. You can see that it's commented out. Now, I am going to ask the people in the chat to help correct my research here. Because anytime I tried to run this as it came out of the samples repo, I got an instant explosion of an exception saying, hey, you need to prove that you're allowed to access this. You're not just allowed to do this with some publicly known details. What is it that you can use to prove that you're you? And so I needed to add in this extra one. The client secret, so I can prove that I should have access to the authentication. I couldn't get it working without this. I am really happy to be proved wrong here. So if there's anybody in the chat that wants to tell me what I did wrong here, I am open to receiving those comments. So that is how we're going to connect to our authentication. But then we also need to call downstream to get the weather from our downstream API. And we actually do that inside of our authentication again. We are going to enable the token acquisition to call downstream, which kind of makes sense. And then we're going to add a downstream API. We're going to give it a URL. This should, of course, be in the settings, but it's not. And we need to give it the scopes that we need in order to call that downstream URL. And then finally, we're adding the distributed token cache. This is all in memory because it's a demo running on my local machines. Of course, in production, you're going to have to do something way more complicated than that to make sure that it stays safe. I'm not going to go through that because there is no time today. But if you download the sample from the GitHub repo, you will see that there is a load of commented out code here that tells you what you need to do, what extra things you need to add to your solution in order to get that distributed cache working for you. In a proper, safe production way. Then we just have the standard things. We're going to add the authorization, which of course we need to use inside of our Blazor app. And we are adding our server weather forecaster service. This is what we're going to use in order to get the client data from the downstream API. We'll look at that in just a second. And right down here, this is the one API that we're exposing from our web app. our first weather forecast endpoint, because our client application is going to call our server application, and that's going to deal with all of the authentication for further down the chain. And for that, we're just using that weather forecast, get weather forecast async. The rest of what you see underneath is kind of just standard Blazor, so we're not going to look into that. Rather, we're going to have a look at our server weather forecast. And I hope you can see this, having the text slightly bigger so that you can see it at home also means it's hard to get everything on the screen, of course. What happens if we drag that across? Well, that kind of works. So, get weather forecast. We do not call our HTTP client in order to get this information. Rather, we pass in our downstream API, and then we use this downstream API saying, find the configuration for the one that we want. Now, this is all magic text. I would strongly recommend you put this in some way that it's not a magic text, but as long as it matches what you've got in your program, it's going to work for you. We are giving the URL that we need within the base URL that we've given in this program CS. And with the call API for user async, that is automatically going to use the credentials from the user accessing the server. So again, we don't need to set anything else up ourselves. All this so far looks kind of cool, and it seems to take a lot of complexity away from us. The Blazor side for this is fairly awesome. This all then gets returned, and we display it on the page inside of our client app, which is where we're going to go next. This is our WASM application, and there is only one line that we need in order to add the user authentication from the server here. You can see me smiling because I just think this is so cool. We have this line of code here. Add authentication state deserialization. It does what it says on the tin. On the server, we serialize it. It gets sent to the client. On the client, we deserialize it. We have an authentication state provider that we can use inside of our Blazor WASM application. This so far is keeping stuff nice and simple. Then we need to get to our minimal API, and that is also fairly simple. We need to add authentication to our service for our minimal API. We are just going to be adding a JWT token to this, and we're going to pass in a couple of options that we need for it. We need to know the authority, who can prove that the token you've been given is good, and we need to know the audience, which is what is the API URL for your application that you're running, your application registration inside of your Microsoft Entra. We don't need any secrets here because this is not giving out any tokens or credentials. All this is doing is saying, hey, I have this token. Am I supposed to have this token? Is this a valid token? And getting that information back from Entra ID. Then we can scroll down a bit, and here we have our weather forecast, which looks kind of the same as it does for most of the other weather forecast demos that we have inside of dotnet. We're just returning a random list of temperatures for the coming days with authorization. So that's it. All of this will make our application work. Now we just need to set a few of our secrets. And we're going to start that with, well, we're not going to pin that because that takes even less space. We have our two secrets files. This is a secret file that we have for our Blazor application. And here you can see the JWT bearer authority and audience that we're using in the other one. So I need to just come down here and bring up my Entra ID portal. And this is, I'm just going to zoom out a bit because that's really unreadable for me. Looking at the screen in front of me, I think that's still readable for you. If not, Chris, please put something inside of the chat window. You can see here that I've got all of my app registration set up because I play with this an amount. You can also see we have a Blazor Web Entra app and we have a minimal API JWT app. That's because if you're giving a live demo, always have a backup plan because you never know when it's go wrong on you at the last stage. But let's hope that we don't need that today. we're going to make a new app registration. And this is going to be for the minimal JWT API. And because we already have one, we're going to call it a demo. We only want people from within our TARDIS tenant to do this. We are going to skip the redirect URI because this doesn't handle any login information. This is only going to check that you've got the correct tokens. It's not going to give you any. We're going to register this. We now have it available for us. And we are going to expose an API from here. So this is going to be our WeatherGet API. So we're going to add a scope. First, we get our application URI. This is going to be that audience that I was talking about. And it creates one for you on the fly because I've not set one up yet because I've only just created it. So we'll accept this one and move on. And then because I want it to work everywhere, and because I am the queen of typos, I'm just going to copy paste the scope name that we're going to be using everywhere, which is weather.get. Admins can consent to it. We're going to look at that one in just a minute. And then we need to give it a nice name. So why don't we call this allows, we're going to call it weather.get because that's simple, isn't it? And allows some users to know if they need an umbrella. The user consent name you don't need to fill in. I'm going to leave it blank for now just for time, but one is to let admins know, no, this is really what you need to do, and one is for the users to know what they are consenting to when they add this scope. We need it to be enabled, and we're going to add that here. So now we have this scope for weather.get. This is all that we need to do to set up our minimal JWT API. Go back to the registrations. How are we doing? 10 minutes? We should be okay. We're going to add another new one. And if the first one was for the API, you've guessed it, this one's going to be for the Blazor app. So Blazor Web Entra Demo. Again, this one is only going to be for the TARDIS. Now we do need a redirect URI because people are going to be logging in with this one. So we're going to select web, and then we're going to come back to our original program. And what did we say it was? We said it was sign-in-OIDC. So that is going to be HTTPS localhost because I'm running it locally. We don't want it to be a port. We want it to be an endpoint. Now you notice here, I'm not putting the port number on because we don't need to. This will just validate against localhost. This one is fine. So let's register this one now. And then we need to do a couple of different things in order to get this to work before we can start copying all of those values over and actually use them inside of our application. The first one we need to do is add an API permission because, wow, that's a lot of information hiding on the screen. We need this application that the user is going to be logging in with to have permission to access that downstream API. So we're going to add a permission here. It is a permission that my org uses, and it's going to be minimal, and we want this demo. And we want weather.get, add permissions. And that should... Okay, so we have this now. Now you see this isn't granted for TARDIS, so at the moment this won't work because we haven't granted it admin permission. They do give a nice useful tip here. You can go to Enterprise Applications, and here we can just say grant consent as me. Next, I just want to accept all the permissions, and that should, if we go back now, say granted for TARDIS. So we now have that working downstream API. Last thing we need is a certificate and secret. This is what we're going to do to prove that we can access this application. So let's try new client secret, and this is going to be, what is this? It's .NET conf demo. We're going to add our secret. We see the value here. You only see this once. Once you leave this page, you can never see this again. So make sure you note it down when you're doing this, or you're going to have to delete it and add another new one. So before we forget, let's copy that, come over to our first secret, and we'll set the first secret up inside of our application. And then we'll save just in case I do something stupid, trying to look over 2 different screens to get this working. Then we can come back into our application. There's one more thing that I want to do here. I think I've got enough time, so I'm going to do it. Everything that we're doing today is just going to be a random, everybody gets everything authentication. I don't like just leaving it at that point, because it kind of leaves you grasping for more, and how do you get that fine-grained control that you want? Well, what we can do is add a role, and where do we add that? App roles. We're going to add an app role. And this app role, although we're not going to use it today, I'm going to demonstrate where you see it when you are using it. It's weather.get. That's going to be our app role. It's going to be users and groups. It's going to be weather.get yet again. And we don't want everyone to know if it's raining. So we only want the people who have this role to know if it's raining. I'm British, I can be nasty sometimes. So now we have this weather.get, we now need to give it to people. Now, because I'm on the free tier of Entra, I can only give it to users. I can't give it to everybody, or to give it to groups and large groups of people. If you're on a paid version, you can do that. It's going to make it a lot easier to organize your life. But instead, we're going to come into our users, and we're going to go to Amy Pond, Donna Noble, Stacy TARDIS. Guess what's my favorite TV program? And Amy has roles assigned to her as applications. She has applications assigned to her. And this is a point where my brain fog kicks in, and it's like, how do we add this? Assigned roles, add assignment. You know what? I might have to put this online afterwards, because I am running out of time now, and my mind has just gone, whee! Because it always happens when you're live streaming to the world. Okay, we'll come back. We'll do that later. Let's go back to our enterprise applications and actually get it working first of all, shall we? So we want to come into our Blazor Entra Web demo, and we want to add the things that we need here. So we need our application ID. Why are you in enterprise applications? I want app registrations. Because then you can see everything a lot easier. So we want our client ID. That's the first thing that we're going to put in here. So that's our client ID. Go. Then we need our domain ID. That's the directory. That is our directory. Copy that. Oh no, that's a tenant, isn't it? I just told you exactly what all of this was, and then I've just done it wrong, because of course I have. And then we want our domain, which is, come on, give me the domain. Overview. That one, Stacy.TARDIS. How are we doing for time? 5 minutes. This is not stressful at all. No. What are you doing, computer? It's deciding to put everything on a new line, because of course it's deciding to put everything on a new line. Why wouldn't it? Thank you. And now we need our downstream scopes, which if we come back to our app and go to our enterprise applications, our demo, not enterprise applications. We want normal applications. You see, this is where it gets complex. The Blazor stuff is really easy. It's when you get into Entra ID that you have to keep your head about you and make sure that you're in the right place, because for some reason you need to set it up in many different places in order to get it working for you. But now we can come into our API permissions. We can come into here, and we need this permission here. This is our scope that we want to set inside of our application. And then just to make it easy, this is the audience for our second. So we need, our audience is going to be just the API URI of the enterprise application. And we need the tenant ID as the authority. So we're going to sts.windows.net, and then we're going to my tenant in order to do this. Is this going to work? Who knows? We'll find out in 2 seconds. Let's give it a run. So there's our API running. It doesn't have a Swagger. That's fine. I don't care about that. Now we need to run our Blazor Web Application. This one should give us something on the screen. Come on, 2 minutes. You can do this. So here's our application. We have a counter. If we log in, then you can see I'm logged in as Stacy Cashmore here. But I can get the weather, and that is coming from all the way downstream. Fun thing, although that is not my OnTardis account, that is my account because I own it, so I'm kind of allowed to use it. Normally, when I don't mess up a little bit earlier in the demo, I prefer to log out here, log in as Amy. And yeah, my identity at that point is Amy. But no, today, I'm really me. So that is kind of a very whirlwind tour. 20 minutes to get this done is tight, as you saw. As I said at the beginning, I wanted to do this because I wanted to demystify what you can do in Entra ID. Unfortunately, whilst the Blazor side is easy, I've had to accept that, yeah, the Entra ID has a lot of moving parts. Once you get your head around it, it is perfectly doable. You can go a lot deeper than this. Follow the Blazor samples. You can get this working for yourself. I have 1 minute left, so just seriously, have a go, have a play, demystify it for yourself, and have fun.